Charles Sanders Peirce, pronounced Peirce, was an American philosopher, logician, mathematician, and scientist, widely regarded as the father of pragmatism and a pioneer in semiotics, the theory of signs. His life was one of intellectual brilliance, but also personal struggle. Here is a comprehensive overview of his life and work, early life and education. Born September 10, 1839, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, USA. Father, Benjamin Peirce, a prominent mathematician and Harvard professor. Charles was born into an intellectually elite environment. From a young age, he showed strong aptitudes in science and logic, heavily influenced by his father. Education. Entered Harvard College at age 16 and graduated in 1859. Earned a BSc in chemistry from the Lawrence Scientific School at Harvard in 1863. Professional life. Peirce never held a permanent academic position, partly due to his difficult personality, unconventional behavior, and personal controversies. Scientific work. Worked for over 30 years at the United States Coast Survey, doing geodesy and map-making. Made contributions to astronomy, mathematics, and physics, including the pendulum experiments to measure gravity, contributions to measurement theory and error analysis. Philosophical work. Developed pragmatism, later termed pragmatism to distinguish his version from others like William James's. Key principle. The meaning of a concept lies in its practical effects and observable outcomes. Contributions to logic. Pioneer of symbolic logic and quantification theory, predating Frege. Developed the truth table and logical connectives, formulated an early version of abductive reasoning, inference to the best explanation. Semiotics. Theory of signs, defined a sign as something that stands for something else to someone. Distinguished. 3 types of signs. Icon. Resembles what it represents. Index, directly connected symbol. Arbitrary or conventional scientific. Method. Proposed a triadic method of inquiry. Abduction, hypothesis generation, deduction, prediction, induction, testing, and generalization. Major writings. Peirce was a prolific writer, but published relatively little in his lifetime. His major writings include The Fixation of Belief, 1877, How to Make Our Ideas Clear, 1878, On a New List of Categories, 1867, Collected Papers of Charles Sanders Peirce, 8 volumes, posthumously published starting in the 1930s. Later life and struggles. Peirce's career was derailed by personal scandals, including a controversial second marriage and rumors about his morality. He was never offered a tenured university position, lived in poverty for much of his later life, surviving on small writing commissions and aid from friends like William James. Despite hardships, he continued to write extensively, developing a complex system of metaphysics and logic. Death. Died April 19, 1914, in Milford, Pennsylvania. Left behind thousands of unpublished pages of manuscripts, many still being studied. Legacy. Charles Peirce is now recognized as the founder of American pragmatism, a foundational figure in semiotics, a precursor to analytic philosophy and modern logic, an influence on thinkers like William James, John Dewey, Bertrand Russell, Karl Popper, and Umberto Eco. Institutions like the Peirce Edition Project continue to catalog and publish his writings. Certainly. Here's an expanded and polished version of the Early Life and Education section. About Charles Sanders Peirce, Early Life and Education. Charles Sanders Peirce was born on September 10, 1839, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, into a prominent and intellectually gifted family. His father, Benjamin Peirce, was a distinguished mathematician and professor at Harvard University, known for his work in celestial mechanics and for being one of the leading mathematicians in America at the time. Growing up in this stimulating academic environment, Charles was exposed early on to rigorous logical thinking, mathematics, and scientific inquiry. From a young age, Peirce exhibited a remarkable aptitude for logic, science, and analytical reasoning. His father, personally, tutored him. Certainly. Here's a refined and detailed version of the professional life section on Charles Sanders Peirce. Professional life. Despite his extraordinary intellect and groundbreaking contributions, Charles Sanders Peirce never held a permanent academic position, an unusual fate for someone now considered a founder of multiple disciplines. His professional life was a complex blend of scientific achievement, philosophical innovation, and personal hardship. Scientific career: Peirce spent the majority of his working life employed by the United States Coast Survey, now part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, where he worked from 1859 to 1891. This government position allowed him to apply his scientific training in practical contexts, particularly in geodesy, the science of measuring Earth's shape and gravitational field, astronomy, and mathematical physics. He led important pendulum experiments to determine local variations in gravity, a cutting-edge task at the time. His work contributed to the development of precision measurement and laid foundational principles in error analysis, which are still relevant in scientific methodology today. He also made advances in map-making, instrument calibration, and astronomical observation, and he frequently published technical reports that were well respected in the scientific community. Although his government work provided some financial stability, Peirce's personality and behavior, often seen as eccentric or difficult, hampered his prospects for advancement. Moreover, he was frequently at odds with bureaucratic norms and academic politics. Philosophical contributions. Peirce's most profound and lasting impact lies in philosophy, particularly in logic, epistemology, metaphysics, and the philosophy of science. In the 1870s, he developed a philosophical method he called Pragmatism, which he later renamed Pragmatism to differentiate it from more popularized versions espoused by contemporaries like William James and John Dewey. Core idea of pragmatism: the meaning of any concept or proposition lies in its practical consequences, that is, how it would affect action and experience. Peirce saw philosophy not as abstract speculation, but as a form of inquiry grounded in science, with methods drawn from logic and observation. Innovations in logic. Peirce was a pioneer in modern symbolic logic, predating and paralleling the work of Gottlob Frege. He introduced early forms of the truth table, quantification theory, and predicate logic. He formulated the concept of abductive reasoning, a form of logical inference distinct from deduction and induction, involving the generation of hypotheses to explain observed phenomena. This contribution has had lasting influence in fields as diverse as artificial intelligence, cognitive science, and philosophy of science. Founder of Semiotics. Peirce also laid the foundations for semiotics, the theory of signs and symbols, a field later expanded by scholars like Ferdinand de Saussure and Umberto Eco. He proposed a triadic model of the sign icon, a sign that resembles its object, e.g., a portrait or diagram. Index, a sign physically or causally connected to its object, e.g., smoke indicating fire. Symbol, a sign connected to its object by social convention or learned association, e.g., words or mathematical symbols. This model remains central to contemporary theories of language, communication, and cognition, teaching and academic marginalization. Although Peirce occasionally taught at Johns Hopkins University in the 1870s, his academic career was short-lived. His erratic personal behavior, including a controversial second marriage to a younger woman, while still technically married to his first wife, scandalized academic circles. As a result, he was blacklisted from most academic institutions, despite the advocacy of friends like William James, who admired Peirce's intellect and frequently tried to support him both publicly and financially. Certainly, here's a refined and detailed version of the philosophical work section on Charles Sanders Peirce. Philosophical work. Charles Sanders Peirce was one of the most original and wide-ranging philosophers in American history. His work laid the groundwork for several modern fields, especially pragmatism, semiotics, epistemology, and logic. His approach to philosophy was deeply rooted in scientific reasoning, emphasizing clarity, method, and the fallibility of human knowledge. Pragmatism. Peirce is best known as the founder of Pragmatism, a philosophical method he introduced in the 1870s. His most influential articulation of this idea came in two essays: The Fixation of Belief, 1877, How to Make Our Ideas Clear, 1878. In these works, Peirce proposed that our ideas acquire meaning only through their practical effects. The truth of a belief, he argued, is not abstract or metaphysical, but is determined by its observable consequences in experience and action. Peirce's pragmatic maxim: consider what effects that might conceivably have practical bearings, we conceive the object of our conception to have. Then our conception of these effects is the whole of our conception of the object. Peirce later renamed his version of pragmatism Pragmatism to distinguish it from what he saw as the more psychological or simplistic versions popularized by William James and John Dewey. Theory of inquiry and scientific method. Peirce believed that the process of inquiry is at the heart of both science and philosophy. He outlined a three-step method of reasoning that mirrors scientific investigation: abduction, forming a hypothesis to explain surprising observations; deduction, drawing logical consequences or predictions from the high;